Today's video is sponsored by Athletic Greens. All right guys, today we have a choice to make about which project we're going to work on, and on the one hand we could finish up the 4L60 to 4L80 swap that we're doing on the LSA supercharged Copo Silverado because we just got the drive shafts back from the shop. They've been modified in length and balanced, and it would only take me about 5 minutes to slap them in, and then we could hop on the road and see how much different that 4L80 drives from the 4L60 that we took out. Or we could start on a project that's been in the works for about a year, the race motor that we're putting together for the UglyTruck that's sitting outside. And that's actually the route that we're gonna take. That's what we're gonna get started on. Yeah, about a year ago we got most of the parts that we needed, and originally this was gonna be just like a 511 cubic inch, mild, 1,000 horse, Gen 7 big block build. But after thinking for a little bit, I decided that we're gonna go pull all the stops out. We're going with a 1,500 horsepower, 538 cubic inch Gen 7 big block. And because that little kind of change of mind took place, we had to order a whole bunch of more parts, and that basically set us back months because of, well, you know, supply chain issues and stuff like that. But everything is finally here and we can finally get started on the block. But first, that means we got to do just a little bit of mock-up and modification. Now, speaking of modification, if you guys watch this channel at all, you probably know that I really ought to modify my diet because it seems like lately most of my meals consist of ice cream cones. But there is one other thing that I've been trying lately to help get a little bit more nutrition into my diet, and that is AG1. AG1 by Athletic Greens is a nutritional drink that I make every single morning, and it helps me get some of those nutrients that I'd otherwise be missing out on due to my less than stellar diet. Now, it does have 75 high-quality ingredients, and it has all kinds of stuff, including vitamins, minerals, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. Now, I got to admit, when I first saw AG1, I was a little bit skeptical about how the stuff might taste, but after tasting it for the first time, I got to say I am very impressed, and now I look forward to drinking AG1 every single morning. Now, it's super convenient. All you got to do is take 1 scoop of powder and pour it into 8 ounces of water, shake it up, and enjoy. Plus, their travel packets make it really convenient for when you're on the go. So one of my favorite things that I noticed about AG1 after drinking it for the first time is the steady boost in energy that I get throughout the day, rather than that sudden jolt you get from like the caffeine in a coffee or an energy drink. The other thing I love is the support and immunity that you get because there's all kinds of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, you know, stuff that is normally going to be missing from, or at least my diet. Now, if you want to get the same benefits and convenience of AG1, check out athleticgreens.com/LawrenceLT to get started on your order. Athletic Greens is going to give my community a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Let's get to work. So you'll notice we have ARP studs in the block here for the mains. One of the changes that we had to do was get this line hone after putting the new fasteners, and just because they have an increased clamp load over stock, they'll actually distort the main cap a little more than a stock bolt would. So you get the strength benefit of the ARP, but you just got to have the line hone corrected. So that was just one of the many operations we did to this block. So I just noticed this, pretty cool. There's a little slot right there that allows you to put a pry bar in and pop up the main caps. Pretty slick. I should probably note here also that this block has not been final cleaned yet. The first steps that we're going to be doing are just a little bit of mock-up because I think there's some clearancing we have to do on the front for the timing chain. And you guys asked about like why the cylinder walls look so funny. This is just a layer of like white lithium grease. just to kind of stop anything, you know, rust or whatever from happening during transport and storage. Now, one important thing I hope I remember on final assembly is there's a little nozzle I'm supposed to put down in there for the oil squirter. So I'm kind of telling you guys, but also telling myself, double check me when I'm finally assembling this. We cannot forget that oil squirter, otherwise we'll have zero oil pressure. So you guys are going to hold me accountable. Even though this is not final assembly, I still want to put a little bit of assembly lube on here just to be safe. Now, I don't know what the crankshaft in your little baby LS is going to weigh, but this big block crank, I think it's safe to say this thing is just about over 100 pounds. Oh. So one more thing you guys cannot let me forget, and that is the reluctor wheel. Got a brand new one, and we will get that on, but remember, temporary. All right, it's one 4.5-inch stroke crank installed. Now, we do have the crankshaft in, but this is actually not the final assembly of the engine. I still haven't given the block a thorough cleaning, but the reason why I'm putting it together for mock-up is because there are a few things I need to check clearance on. The main one is the timing chain, and I'll get to that in just a second, but first we have the crankshaft in place. This is a forged steel 4.5-inch stroke crankshaft. Has been balanced and all that. I had Hank set all the main bearing and rod bearing clearances, so everything spins nice and freely. But the only thing we haven't done yet, which is up to me, is setting the thrust. That's the amount of distance the crank can go back and forth. Right now, it's like 2.5 thousandths or 25 10,000ths, depending on how you like to say your numbers. It should be, I believe, about 6 to 8 thousandths. I need to double check that spec, but I'm pretty positive 2 thousandths is too tight. So what I'll do is I'll just, when I pull everything back apart for final assembly, I'll get some like 400 or 500 grit sandpaper with a little bit of oil, and I'll just lightly sand the thrust bearings on one side to open that up to give me, you know, 6 or 7 or however many thousandths we're supposed to have. But everything else fits great. This PSI block has already been clearanced for the throw of the crank and all that stuff. In fact, I'm pretty sure when these PSI 8.8s were equipped in generators, they had a 4.5-inch stroke crank anyway. So nothing real out of the ordinary there, except this is a forged crankshaft that's much, much stronger than the stock one. And the stock stroke, I think, is like 4 3/8. But anyway, onto the timing chain. This is what we're going to be using. JP Performance is a double row timing chain, and this is pretty much standard big block Chevy stuff, except remember the 8.1 uses a 1X cam gear just like an LS, so you can see that little groove cut out there. So this is basically a big block Chevy timing set, double row. It also has multiple positions so we can advance or retard the timing of the camshaft. But I'm pretty sure from what I've read that thicker upper sprocket is going to interfere in a couple of places through here. So I may have to clearance the block just a little bit. And that's why I haven't done any final cleaning it, because if I have to grind metal away, of course, we don't want to, you know, clean the thing twice. So I'll get the cam slid in place, I'll get the sprocket on, and then if we have to do some grinding, we'll just get that knocked out real quick. See those lift numbers right there? 717 and 714. Now that is a real cam. So this right here is one of the problem areas that I'm going to run into putting the double row chain on. Normally this is a single row chain, so the double row chain is better, it's stronger, it'll last longer, but it's going to interfere slightly with the block right through this little section. So all I got to do is relieve that just a little bit. I mean, I got the cam bolts tight and it can still turn fairly freely. It just like rubs the chain on the back side there. So a little bit of grinder work and we're in business. So we're actually going to shift gears just for a second. I want to make sure I take care of this little bit of clearancing, but I don't want to do any grinding with the crank and the cam still in place. Obviously, I'll have to put the cam back in to test fit it, but I think what I'm going to do now is come back to this. I want to hang a piston and rod just to kind of let everything spin through to make sure we have no clearance problems there, you know, the connecting rod hitting the side of the block or anything like that. Then once we know that's good, we'll pull the crank out and then I'll do the grinding, just because there's going to be a lot of sparks flying and I don't want to get anything dirtier than I have to or risk inadvertently damaging something. So yeah, let's get the rods and pistons out. Yeah, we got two different bearings here, and you probably can't see it, but the only difference is this one is 808U/N, and this one is 808L/N. So I believe this is the lower, the one that goes in the cap, U upper, the one that goes in the rod. So I don't anticipate any problems, but basically just going to kind of roll everything through, make sure we have plenty of room between the rod bolts, the block, the skirt of the piston, and all that good stuff. Which it looks like we should have plenty. So there's one last thing I do need to check, but to do that I need to pull out these 4 inner studs. And replace them with these. Now, it's worth mentioning here, these are made by ARP. They're the same exact kind of fastener as the ones that we just pulled out. So it will not affect our torque reading or our clamp load. Same exact bolt. They do have different brands of these, so you just kind of want to keep that in mind. Now I only have one connecting rod and piston assembly in the engine right now, and that one clears fine. I am going to move that around to all 8 positions just to double check that I don't have to do any extra clearancing. But the windage tray is giving me a few issues, which I kind of expected going in because I knew that it wouldn't be easy on this particular type of engine. So basically this screen is called a windage tray, and it stops the turbulent air that's been generated by the crankshaft from, splashing oil back up onto the crankshaft. It kind of helps save power. The first issue was the spacing on the bolts. The Gen 7, 8 ones use a wider spacing than the old big blocks. This is designed for a big block. So we took care of that easily enough by ovaling out the bolt holes. The next problem is thread engagement here. The stud's not quite long enough, and if you pay attention to the bolt on the connecting rod, well, you can see it will actually hit. So if I raise these up far enough that it won't hit, then I don't have enough room to put a nut on. So that would be solved pretty easily by just building a little standoff bracket underneath. I'll probably end up doing that. But the third problem is in this area right through here, because the oil pan for this thing, you can see the little divot right here. I think that indentation is for the front differential, which we don't have. But that's going to actually interfere, and that pushes the oil pan off to the side so the bolts don't line up. So I'll probably have to either notch this out or bend it in. But the problem with bending it in is if you watch the big end of the rod kind of right through, let's see, that's like the closest spot right through there. There's not really a whole lot of extra space to bend anything in. So probably we'll have to do a little bit of notching, and then maybe I'll weld on just a little piece of reinforcement metal to stop that screen from getting, you have to have this thick reinforcement on there, otherwise the screen is pretty weak. So anyway, that's the windage tray. Not a huge deal. I'll fix that later on. The main thing I want to figure out now as we put the bottom end together is if all the parts are basically going to fit. So any clearance thing I have to do on the block can be done now before we do our final cleaning. So I'm going to put the windage tray aside for now. Not a huge deal. The other thing I wanted to mention, just since we're on the subject of oiling, the inside of the pan for the 8-1 is just open, and the LSs, they have like a little tray here that kind of acts as like a baffle of sorts to keep oil from sloshing up. I'm going to try to add one of those in addition to the windage tray. If not, maybe say that it's impossible to get this windage tray to work, I'll at least try to have a baffle in the bottom of the pan. But anyway, we'll talk about oiling another day. For now, I'm going to pull this apart. I'm going to move that one connecting rod and piston around to all 8 holes just to make sure that it fits in every single one of them. And then we'll take it apart. We'll clearance the front of the block for the timing chain. And then that's kind of all of our mock-up complete. So all I'm really trying to do right here is prevent any metal shavings from getting into the cam bearing area. All I've got to do is grind this little section right here. Everything else has plenty of space. And it's not by much, like the change is barely rubs it. So all we're gonna do is relieve that area. If we go too far, obviously there's a water jacket right behind here that would cause some major damage, but we probably need to take like 10 or 15 thousandths away from that. So just gonna barely relieve it. So now that we have all the cutting and grinding done, the cam sprocket fits exactly like it should. We got plenty of clearance there. And I'm glad we took the effort to run a double roller because it's just a better timing chain than a single roller. And yeah, now that we have everything cut and ground and modified, it's time to start the cleaning process, which I'll show you guys in a future video because I just ordered the brush kit that I'm gonna need to get this thing cleaned inside and out. And it's just super important on a brand new motor like this, I guess on any fresh build, but this block has never been run in any sort of vehicle or pump or generator or any sort of power equipment. So it's a brand new block that came from PSI. They did all the rough machining processes on it, and then of course we sent it to our machine shop. They honed it, we cut an O-ring groove in the head, we oversized the head bolts to 1/2 inch, we put a 903 lifter bore in, which is larger than stock. We line honed it. And all those operations, they do create a few little chips and, you know, grinding dust and stuff like that. And I think they put this in like their little hot wash blast cabinet thing, but there's of course still a lot of, you know, little shavings and debris that could possibly be in, you know, the oil passageways and stuff like that. So it's on me. I'm the final guy who's going to be touching this thing, so it's my responsibility to make sure everything is 110%. Which is exactly why I took the time to kind of mock up the piston in all 8 positions to make sure that nothing was gonna hit. I mean, I trust what the machine shop has done, but once again, I'm the guy putting this together, so it's kind of on me to make sure that it's right. The only 2 or 3 changes that we're gonna have to make, or that we did make, I guess. 1, we clearanced for the double row timing chain right there, super simple. 2, we are gonna have to modify the thrust bearing just a little bit, which is totally normal. And then, let's see, actually I think that was it, just those 2 things. Oh, I was also going to point out that the closest clearance in the bottom end, even with a 4.5 inch stroke crankshaft, we got plenty of room here on the skirts of the block for the rod to do its thing. But when the cam is in, because we do have a fairly high lift camshaft, the big end of the connecting rod does come fairly close to the lobes of the cam, like when the lobe is pointing down and the connecting rod is up. I put a 70 thousandths feeler gauge in there and then it cleared. On the rod instructions, they say minimum of 60 thousandths clearance everywhere, including the cam lobe. So we are going to be golden, nothing will hit, and now I just feel better knowing that I'm the one that checked it, because, you know, you could take someone's word for it, and, you know, let's say in this case, if I didn't check it, it would have been just fine, but it's, I don't know, peace of mind, worth it, whatever. But anyway, that's going to bring this video to a close. So thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments if you have any technical questions about any of this stuff that we went over, because I kind of breezed through it. Sometimes if I get too in depth into the tech stuff, it feels like it slows the video down to me. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. I appreciate you, honestly, each and every one of you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are trying to reach 100,000 subs, and I can't do it without your help. So thank you guys in advance. Now, I'm not saying I have a problem or anything, but I may or may not have already eaten the entire box of drumsticks I got last week. Or 2 days ago. But who's counting? It's hot out.